My name is Hudson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I would be homeless. After losing my wife of 42 years to cancer, I moved in with my daughter. 6 months later, over dinner, she delivered her verdict. Either you work or you are out on the street. With nowhere else to go, I accepted a job as a caregiver for a paralyzed billionaire. What should have been simple turned into anything, but when on my very first night, I froze at what happened next. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and hit subscribe to join my journey. My life with Eleanor had been everything I could have hoped for. We met during college at a small university in Wisconsin, married at 23, and built a life together that was rich in love, if not in money. For 35 years, I taught history at Lakeside High School, while Eleanor ran a small bookstore downtown. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a view of Lake Michigan that took my breath away every morning. Our only daughter, Amanda, came along 3 years into our marriage. She was brilliant from the start, always focused on achievements and success. Unlike us, she wanted more than small-town life could offer. We supported her dreams, even when they took her to Chicago for a corporate career with a major tech company. She visited on holidays and called weekly, but it was clear her world had become very different from ours. Eleanor and I had simple pleasures: Saturday morning farmers markets, Sunday afternoon bike rides along the lakeshore, and quiet evenings reading on our porch swing. We had plans for retirement, modest ones like visiting national parks in our old camper van and volunteering at the local elementary school reading program. The diagnosis came without warning during a routine physical. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor said words like aggressive and limited options, but all I could see was Eleanor squeezing my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "We will fight this," she said on the drive home, her voice steady despite the death sentence we had just received. And fight we did. Aggressive chemotherapy that took her beautiful silver hair, radiation that burned her skin, experimental treatments that drained our retirement savings when insurance refused coverage. I took a leave of absence from teaching to drive her to appointments, hold back her hair when she was sick, and research every possible treatment option. I learned to change IV lines, manage pain medications, and interpret lab results. I became her advocate, her nurse, and her constant companion in a battle we were slowly losing. Through it all, Eleanor remained brave. "This is just a chapter, Hudson," she would say during her good moments. Not the whole story. She insisted we still find joy where we could. When she felt strong enough, I would push her wheelchair to the lake where we would watch the sunset like we always had. Amanda flew in when she could, but her visits became shorter as Eleanor declined. "I cannot stand to see her like this," she confided one evening before rushing back to Chicago. I understood her pain but could not leave myself. This was my Eleanor, in sickness as in health. The final months were a blur of hospital rooms, hospice nurses, and nights spent sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside her bed. I read to her from her favorite books when she could no longer hold them herself. I played the folk music we had danced to in our youth. I reminded her of our life together, when the morphine made her confused. On our 42nd anniversary, with autumn leaves visible through the hospital window, Eleanor slipped away while I held her hand. "I love you, teacher man," she whispered, using the nickname from our college days. Then she was gone, taking a piece of me with her. The funeral was a simple affair, just as she would have wanted. Former students filled the small chapel, many of them now adults with children of their own. Amanda delivered a beautiful eulogy that captured her mother's spirit, then flew back to Chicago the next morning, citing work commitments. Left alone in our home, I wandered from room to room like a ghost. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her favorite mug sat by the coffee maker. Her garden gloves remained on the porch railing where she had left them before that fateful doctor appointment. The medical bills arrived with cruel regularity. Despite insurance, we owed nearly $200,000 for the experimental treatments we had pursued in desperation. My teacher's pension would not cover the debt, especially with the mortgage still outstanding. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I could not bring myself to return to teaching. My principal was understanding, but eventually had to replace me. I took early retirement, which further reduced my already modest pension. The decision to sell our home came after sleepless nights, calculating and recalculating numbers that never balanced. The small real estate agent looked uncomfortable as she explained that housing prices had dropped in our area. The sale would cover the medical debt but leave almost nothing for me to start over. Packing up 42 years of memories nearly broke me. Each photo album, each piece of furniture we had chosen together, each book on our shelves, told the story of a life well lived and cruelly cut short. In the end, I donated most of it to the local charity shop, keeping only what would fit in 2 suitcases. The last night in our empty house, I sat on the floor of our bedroom and wept for the first time since Eleanor died. Not just for her, but for the future we had planned, and would never have. For the security I had worked decades to build, now gone in a matter of months. For the dignity of independence I was about to lose. The next morning, I called Amanda. The conversation was brief and uncomfortable. "I need to ask a favor," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. "I need a place to stay while I figure things out." The silence stretched before she answered. "Of course, Dad. We have a guest room. It will be temporary, right?" "Yes," I promised, having no idea how I would make good on those words. "Just until I get back on my feet." I boarded the bus to Chicago the next day, watching through the window as Lakeside disappeared behind me. 45 years in one place. And now at 68, I was starting over with nothing but 2 suitcases and a dwindling bank account. Amanda met me at the bus station in her sleek silver BMW. She hugged me briefly, then checked her watch. "I have a conference call in an hour. We should get going." The contrast between my old life and hers hit me as we drove through downtown Chicago to her lakefront condo. Glass and steel towers reached toward the sky, nothing like the small-town storefronts and Victorian homes of Lakeside. "James is excited to have you," she said, referring to her husband of 15 years. I doubted this was true, having met the investment banker only a handful of times at holidays. He had always seemed impatient with small talk, checking his phone throughout family dinners. The twins, Tyler and Zoe, now 16, greeted me with the awkward enthusiasm of teenagers meeting a relative they barely knew. They had visited Lakeside only twice in the past 5 years, always glued to their devices and counting the days until they could return to the city. "The guest room is through here," Amanda said, leading me down a hallway in their penthouse apartment. The room was immaculate and impersonal, like a hotel suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Lake Michigan, the same lake I had viewed from my porch for decades, now framed by skyscrapers instead of pine trees. "Thank you for this," I said, setting down my suitcases. "Of course, Dad. Family helps family." Her smile did not quite reach her eyes. "Dinner is at 7. James will be home by then." Left alone, I unpacked my meager belongings. Photos of Eleanor and me went on the nightstand. Her reading glasses, which I could not bear to discard, in the drawer beside the bed. I showered and changed, wanting to make a good impression at dinner. The first few days followed a predictable pattern. Amanda left early for her office, where she served as marketing director for a tech company. James departed even earlier for his investment firm. The twins went to a private school that cost more per year than I had made as a teacher. I tried to make myself useful, preparing dinner from the gourmet ingredients in their massive kitchen. The first night, Amanda picked at her plate. "This is a bit basic, is not it?" she said, pushing aside the roast chicken that had been a family favorite when she was growing up. "Your mom always loved this recipe," I replied. "Well, we usually do keto," James said, reaching for his wine glass, "or get takeout." The twins ate silently, absorbed in their phones beneath the table. After that, I stuck to cleaning and laundry, tasks that required no culinary judgment. I learned their schedules, their preferences for how shirts should be folded, and which surfaces required special cleaners. I became, essentially, an unpaid housekeeper. Weeks passed this way. I applied for jobs online using Amanda's laptop while she was at work, Retail positions, security guard openings, even fast food restaurants. My inbox filled with polite rejections or, more often, silence. The few interviews I secured ended quickly when they saw my age in person. A month into my stay, I overheard an argument between Amanda and James in their bedroom. "How long is he planning to stay?" James asked, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "I do not know. He has nowhere else to go." "We did not sign up for this, Amanda. We have our own retirement to think about. We cannot support him indefinitely. What am I supposed to do? He is my father. He should have planned better. Our guest room was supposed to be a home gym, not a permanent solution for your dad." The conversation shifted to whispers I could not make out, but the message was clear. I was a burden, an obligation they had not anticipated and did not want. Family dinners grew more tense. James worked later, often missing meals entirely. The twins retreated further into their virtual worlds. Amanda started suggesting job possibilities with increasing frequency. "The grocery store on Michigan Avenue is hiring baggers," she would say, sliding her tablet across the table to show me the posting. "I applied last week," I would answer. "They went with someone younger." Her frustration was palpable. "You need to try harder, Dad. Maybe lower your expectations?" I did not tell her about the janitor position I had been rejected for, or the call center that told me I sounded too old on the phone. My generation was not meant to start over at 68. 3 months into my stay, Amanda announced a family meeting one Sunday afternoon. I was not invited, but could hear them in the living room while I pretended to nap in the guest room. "We need to set some boundaries," Amanda said. "A timeline." "Just tell him he needs to leave," Tyler suggested, his voice cracking with adolescent indifference. "We cannot just throw Grandpa out," Zoe protested, the only voice of support in the room. "No one is throwing anyone out," Amanda clarified. "But we need to be clear about expectations." The conversation continued for an hour, with James presenting financial arguments and Amanda wavering between daughterly duty and marital alliance. By the end, they had reached a consensus I would learn about soon enough. That evening at dinner, Amanda cleared her throat after the main course. "Dad, we need to talk about your situation." I set down my fork, bracing myself. "James and I have been discussing this, and we feel it is time for you to find employment. Any employment. The bills are adding up with an extra person in the house." I nodded, shame burning my cheeks. "I have been trying." "Trying is not enough," James interjected, not unkindly but firmly. "We have our own financial goals." Amanda reached across the table and took my hand. "Either you work or you are out on the street. I am sorry to be so blunt, but we cannot support you indefinitely." The twins studied their plates, uncomfortable witnesses to my humiliation. "How long do I have?" I asked, my mouth dry. 30 days, Amanda replied. "That seems fair." "Absolutely fair," James agreed quickly. I nodded again, unable to speak. 42 years of marriage, 35 years of teaching, raising a daughter, paying taxes and mortgage payments, saving what I could, and it had come to this. 30 days to find work no one would give me, or face homelessness at 68. That night, I lay awake, calculating options that did not exist. My small remaining savings would not cover even a studio apartment in Chicago. Moving back to Lakeside meant nothing without a home or job there. Old colleagues had their own struggles in retirement, and friends my age were dealing with their own health issues or caring for spouses with them. The next morning, I walked to the public library 6 blocks from Amanda's condo. It opened at 9, and I was waiting when the doors unlocked. The elderly librarian, Gloria, nodded in recognition. I had become a regular, using their computers to search job sites and send applications. "Any luck yet, Hudson?" she asked as I signed in. "Not yet," I admitted. "But today might be the day." She smiled sympathetically. "Keep the faith. Something will turn up." If only I could believe that. With the 30-day deadline now looming, desperation clouded every search, every application, every unanswered email. Each rejection felt like another nail in a coffin I could not afford. 2 weeks into my 30-day countdown, I was at my usual computer terminal in the library when Gloria approached with a cup of coffee. "You look like you could use this," she said, setting it beside my keyboard. "Thank you," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "Any chance you know someone hiring 68-year-old history teachers?" Instead of her usual sympathetic smile, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "Have you considered care work?" "Care work?" "Looking after people who need assistance. The elderly, disabled persons, that sort of thing. They often prefer mature caregivers. More patience. Less likely to be on their phones all day." I had not considered it. My only caregiving experience had been with Eleanor, and that had been born of love, not professional training. "I do not have any qualifications," I admitted. Gloria pulled up a chair beside me. "Let me show you something." She typed quickly, navigating to a job board I had not seen before. "These are specialized postings for caregivers. Look at this one." The listing stood out immediately. "Live-in caregiver, needed for private client. Generous compensation. No formal qualifications required. Discretion, essential." The salary listed made me blink. It was triple what I had made as a teacher. "This cannot be legitimate," I said, scanning for the catch. "It is unusual," Gloria agreed. "But sometimes wealthy people are willing to pay for exactly what they want. The live-in aspect means you would have accommodation too." My heartbeat quickened. A solution to both my employment and housing problems seemed too good to be true. "Why has no one taken this job?" I asked. Gloria shrugged. "Maybe they have specific requirements. Maybe the client is difficult. Only one way to find out." I copied down the contact number, thanked Gloria, and went outside to make the call from a quiet corner of the library garden. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. "Grant Enterprises. This is Patricia speaking." The voice was crisp and professional. "Hello. I am calling about the caregiver position advertised." "I see." Her tone shifted slightly. "May I ask your name and age, sir?" "Hudson Williams, 68. "Perfect. Are you available for an interview tomorrow at 10 a.m.? The speed of her response caught me off guard. "Yes, I could do that." "Excellent. Please come to the Grant Tower, 40th floor. Bring identification and be prepared for a background check." She ended the call before I could ask further questions. I sat on a bench, staring at my phone. Something about this felt too easy, but I was in no position to look a gift horse in the mouth. That evening, I mentioned the interview to Amanda as casually as I could over dinner. "A caregiver position?" she repeated, eyebrows raised. "For that kind of money? Dad, it sounds like a scam." "Grant Enterprises is a legitimate company," James interjected, surprising me with his input. "Maxwell Grant is a tech innovator, made billions in artificial intelligence before he was 40. Became a recluse after some accident a few years back." "The accident that paralyzed him," I added, recalling details from my brief research at the library. "That is why he needs a caregiver." Amanda still looked skeptical. "Just be careful. Do not sign anything without having me look at it first." The next morning, I put on my only suit, now hanging loose on my frame after months of stress and modest meals. The Grant Tower dominated the Chicago skyline, all glass and curves rising into the clouds. The security desk in the marble lobby checked my ID and directed me to a private elevator. The 40th floor opened to a reception area decorated in minimalist white and steel. A woman in her 50s with immaculate silver hair rose from behind a desk. "Mr. Williams? I am Patricia Reynolds, Mr. Grant's executive assistant. Thank you for coming." She led me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The table could have seated 20, but only 2 chairs were positioned at one end. "Before we discuss the position, I need to be direct with you," Patricia said, setting a tablet between us. "Mr. Grant has had 6 caregivers in the past year. None lasted longer than a month. May I ask why?" She sighed. "Mr. Grant is brilliant, wealthy, and accustomed to getting exactly what he wants. His accident has made him challenging. He demands perfection and has little patience for mistakes. Most find his expectations impossible to meet. I see, I said, though I was not sure I did. The compensation reflects the difficulty, she continued. The position includes a private room in Mr. Grant's estate, all meals, and the salary discussed in the listing. In return, you would be on call 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. What exactly would my duties include? Assisting with personal care, medication management, meal preparation to his specifications, reading correspondence, accompanying him to medical appointments, and generally ensuring his comfort and privacy. I nodded slowly. I cared for my late wife during her illness. I have some experience with medical needs. Something in Patricia's expression softened. May I ask about your situation, Mr. Williams? Most applicants for this position have formal qualifications. There was no point in pride now. I explained about Eleanor's death, the medical debt, selling our home, and my daughter's ultimatum. Throughout my story, Patricia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on her tablet. "Thank you for your honesty," she said when I finished. Mr. Grant appreciates straightforwardness, which is rare in his experience. Let me be equally honest with you. This position is not for everyone. Mr. Grant is testing you from the moment you meet him, looking for weaknesses or dishonesty. I have nothing to hide, I replied. And at this point, little to lose. Patricia nodded. A background check will be conducted today. Assuming everything is in order, when could you start? Immediately, I said, hope rising in my chest for the first time in months. I will be in touch by this evening. She stood and extended her hand. For what it is worth, Mr. Williams, I think you might be exactly what Mr. Grant needs, whether he knows it or not. I returned to Amanda's condo and waited by the phone, afraid to hope yet unable to stop myself. At precisely 6 p.m., Patricia called. Mr. Williams, the position is yours if you still want it. A car will collect you and your belongings tomorrow at 9 a.m. I thanked her, hands shaking as I ended the call. Amanda and James exchanged glances when I shared the news over dinner. That was fast, Amanda said, suspicion in her tone. They needed someone quickly, I replied, not mentioning the previous caregivers who had quit. Well, it solves our immediate problem, James said pragmatically. And you will be less than an hour away if things do not work out. That night, I packed my 2 suitcases again, the routine becoming sadly familiar. The photos of Eleanor went in last, wrapped in a sweater she had knitted me years ago. Tomorrow would bring another new beginning, perhaps my last chance to reclaim some measure of independence and dignity. The twins surprised me the next morning by emerging from their rooms to say goodbye. Good luck, Grandpa, Zoe said, giving me an awkward hug. Yeah, hope the billionaire guy is not too crazy, Tyler added, which earned him a sharp look from his mother. A sleek black car arrived precisely at 9. The driver, silent and professional in a dark suit, loaded my suitcases in the trunk. Amanda stood in the doorway of her condo, relief and guilt mingling on her face. Call me if you need anything, she said as I got into the car. I will be fine, I assured her, not entirely believing it myself. As the car pulled away from the curb, I offered a silent prayer that this opportunity, however strange, would be the answer I so desperately needed. The drive took us north of Chicago, through affluent suburbs, and into increasingly secluded countryside. After nearly an hour, we turned onto a private road that wound through dense woods. Wrought iron gates opened automatically as we approached, revealing a winding driveway that led to a modern mansion perched on a bluff overlooking Lake Michigan. The structure was a stark contrast to the traditional estates in the area, all glass and angular concrete with multiple levels cascading down the hillside. Immaculate gardens surrounded the property, yet I noticed no gardeners or outdoor staff maintaining them. The car stopped at the main entrance, where Patricia waited on the steps. She wore the same impeccable business attire as during our interview, not a hair out of place despite the breeze from the lake. Welcome to Grant Estate, Mr. Williams, she said as the driver removed my suitcases from the trunk. I will show you to your quarters first, then provide orientation before you meet Mr. Grant. The interior of the mansion was minimalist and museum-like. Polished concrete floors, white walls, and strategic lighting, highlighting contemporary art pieces that probably cost more than my former home. The ceilings soared 2 stories high in the main living area, with a wall of windows showcasing the lake view. The staff is minimal by Mr. Grant's preference, Patricia explained as we walked through the silent house. There is a housekeeper who comes 3 times weekly, a chef who prepares meals in advance, and security personnel who monitor the grounds remotely. You and I are the only ones who interact with Mr. Grant directly. She led me to the east wing, down a corridor to a surprisingly comfortable suite. While still modern in design, my accommodations included a bedroom, private bathroom, and small sitting area with its own television and kitchenette. "This will be your personal space," Patricia said. "When not attending to Mr. Grant, you are free to use these rooms as you wish. Your meals can be taken here or in the main kitchen, depending on Mr. Grant's schedule." I set my suitcases down, immediately feeling out of place among the expensive furnishings. "This is very generous," I said. "The compensation reflects the demands of the position," she replied, matter-of-factly. "Please unpack and change into these." She handed me a stack of clothing, navy blue trousers and button-down shirts, simple but clearly tailored. Mr. Grant prefers a consistent appearance from his staff. "When you are ready, meet me in the kitchen for further orientation." Left alone, I quickly unpacked, placing Eleanor's photos on the bedside table as I had at Amanda's. The clothes fit perfectly, which was unsettling given that I had never provided my measurements. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and state-of-the-art appliances. Patricia waited with a tablet and a thick binder. "This contains Mr. Grant's daily schedules, dietary requirements, medication protocols, and emergency procedures," she said, sliding the binder toward me. "Memorize it as quickly as possible. Mr. Grant dislikes repetitive questions." She spent the next hour walking me through the mansion's layout, security systems, and my specific duties. The list was extensive, from preparing specific breakfast smoothies to reading financial reports aloud for hours to administering medications on a strict schedule. Mr. Grant rises at 7 a.m. sharp. His first medication must be given exactly at 7:15, followed by breakfast at 7:30. He spends mornings in his office reviewing markets until 11, when he requires physical therapy assistance. Lunch follows at 12:30, then rest until 2 p.m. Afternoons vary based on his projects, but dinner is always at 6, followed by reading or music until his final medications at 9 p.m. He retires at 10. The precision of the schedule was daunting, as were the consequences Patricia hinted would follow if it was not maintained. "What about his medical needs?" I asked. "I am not a nurse. His condition requires minimal medical intervention," she replied. "The medications are organized weekly by his doctor. You simply need to ensure he takes them on schedule. As for personal care, Mr. Grant is largely independent, but may require assistance transferring from his wheelchair or reaching items." Something in her tone made me wonder if there was more to the story. But before I could ask, she checked her watch. "It is time for you to meet Mr. Grant. Remember, speak only when spoken to initially. Direct eye contact but not staring. No unsolicited opinions or personal questions. Ready?" I nodded, though I felt anything but ready. Patricia led me through the western wing of the mansion to a set of heavy oak doors that contrasted with the modern architecture. She knocked 3 times, paused, then opened the door without waiting for a response. The study beyond was dimly lit despite the large windows, with heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon Sunday books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and a massive desk dominated the center of the room. Behind it sat Maxwell Grant. My first impression was of fragility. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 45, but thin to the point of gauntness. Dark hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring intense blue eyes that assessed me coldly from behind round spectacles. His wheelchair was a high-tech marvel of carbon fiber and subtle machinery. "Mr. Grant, this is Hudson Williams, your new caregiver," Patricia said formally. Grant did not immediately respond, continuing to study me with unnerving focus. Finally, he spoke, his voice surprisingly deep and authoritative for his frame. You are older than the others." "Yes, sir," I replied, unsure if this was a positive or negative observation. "Experience brings wisdom, or so they say." He wheeled himself around the desk, movements precise and controlled, though I have found it often brings inflexibility instead. "I try to remain adaptable," I offered. A thin smile touched his lips. "We will see." "Patricia has briefed you on the schedule?" "Yes, sir." "And you understand that deviations are unacceptable?" "I do." He nodded once. "You begin now. Patricia will observe today to ensure you understand your duties. Tomorrow you are on your own." With that dismissal, he turned back to his desk, focusing on an array of monitors displaying financial data. Patricia guided me from the room, closing the door silently behind us. "That went well," she whispered as we walked back toward the main part of the house. "Now we begin your practical training." The remainder of the day was a whirlwind of specific instructions. I learned the exact temperature for Grant's shower water, the precise way to prepare his tea, 195 degrees, steeped for exactly 4 minutes, and how to operate the complex home automation system that controlled everything from lighting to security. At 6 p.m., I helped serve dinner, which had been prepared by the chef earlier in the day and required only reheating according to detailed instructions. Grant ate silently while I stood nearby, ready to fetch anything he might need. Patricia observed from the doorway, occasionally giving subtle nods of approval or slight frowns when I misstepped. After dinner, I assisted Grant to the library, where he requested I read aloud from financial reports for 2 hours. The technical jargon was challenging, and several times he corrected my pronunciation of investment terms I had never encountered. By 9 p.m., when I administered his evening medications, exhaustion was setting in. The constant vigilance required to avoid mistakes, the precise timing of every task, and the pressure of Grant's critical gaze had taken their toll. "You did acceptably for a first day," Patricia said, as we prepared Grant for bed, a process that involved specific arrangements of pillows and technology within reach of his wheelchair. "Tomorrow I will be in my office if you have questions, but Mr. Grant expects you to manage independently." After Grant retired, Patricia showed me the monitoring system in my quarters, a tablet that would alert me if he needed assistance during the night. "He rarely calls after hours," she explained, "but you must respond immediately if he does." Finally alone in my room at nearly 11 p.m., I collapsed onto the bed, too tired even to change out of my uniform. The day had been more demanding than any in my teaching career, not physically but mentally, with the constant pressure of perfect performance. As I drifted towards sleep, something nagged at the edges of my consciousness. Small inconsistencies in Grant's condition that I could not quite place. The ease with which he had wheeled himself around his study. The lack of specialized equipment, typical for paralysis patients. The minimal medical supervision for someone with his purported condition. But exhaustion claimed me before I could explore these thoughts further, pulling me into dreamless sleep after the most challenging day of my new reality. I awoke suddenly, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. The digital clock on the nightstand read 12:17 a.m. Something had disturbed my sleep, a sound out of place in the silent mansion. I lay still, listening intently. There it was again, a subtle creaking of floorboards from the hallway outside my room. Sitting up slowly, I considered my options. It could be nothing, an old house settling, or the security patrol Patricia had mentioned. But my instincts, honed by years of monitoring school hallways for truant students, told me someone was moving carefully, trying not to be heard. I slipped from bed, still dressed in my uniform from earlier, and moved to the door. Opening it a crack, I peered into the dimly lit corridor. Nothing moved in my line of sight, but the sound came again, farther down the hallway toward the main part of the house. The responsible action would be to check the security tablet, see if any alarms had been triggered. But something pulled me toward the sound instead, a sense that this might explain the unease I had felt earlier. The mansion was different at night, shadows transforming the minimalist decor into something more ominous. I moved carefully, grateful for the plush runners that muffled my footsteps. Following the intermittent sounds led me toward the West Wing, where Grant's master suite was located. An ethical dilemma presented itself. As Grant's caregiver, I had a responsibility to ensure his safety, but investigating noises near his private quarters in the middle of the night seemed invasive. If he was awake and had not called for assistance, he might view my presence as an intrusion. While I hesitated at the junction between the main house and the West Wing, a shadow moved across the wall ahead, cast by someone walking in Grant's corridor. The movement was too tall, too fluid to be Grant in his wheelchair. My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. An intruder could have bypassed the security system. Grant could be in danger. My responsibility was clear now, and I moved forward as quietly as possible. As I approached Grant's suite, I noticed his door was slightly ajar, a thin line of light spilling into the hallway. Protocol dictated I should knock, but if an intruder was inside, announcing my presence seemed foolish. Instead, I crept closer, positioning myself to see through the narrow opening. What I witnessed froze me in place, my breath caught in my throat. Maxwell Grant stood by the window, silhouetted against the moonlight reflecting off the lake. Not in his wheelchair. Standing, unaided, moving with the ease of someone in perfect health, he stretched his arms overhead, rolled his shoulders, and took several casual steps across the room to a desk, where he typed something into a computer. Every movement betrayed a man without any physical impairment whatsoever. I must have made some sound, a sharp intake of breath or shift of weight, because Grant suddenly looked toward the door. Our eyes met through the narrow opening, his widening in surprise, then narrowing in calculation. "You might as well come in, Williams," he called, his voice carrying none of the strain I had noted during the day. My legs felt leaden as I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. Grant watched me, his expression unreadable. He made no move to return to his wheelchair, which sat empty by the bed. "This is not what it appears," he said after a long silence. "You can walk," I stated the obvious, my mind racing to make sense of the deception. "Clearly." He gestured to a chair near the desk. "Sit down, Williams. This conversation will take some time." I remained standing, uncertainty and anger beginning to replace shock. "You are not paralyzed." "No, I am not." He moved to a cabinet, extracted 2 glasses and a decanter of amber liquid, and poured generous measures. Offering one to me, he continued, "The paralysis is a fabrication, a test I created to find something very specific." "A test?" I accepted the glass automatically, but did not drink. "For what purpose?" Grant took a seat, not in his wheelchair, but in an armchair, opposite the one he had offered me. His posture was relaxed, confident, nothing like the rigid alertness he had displayed earlier. "Loyalty," he replied simply. "Absolute, unimpeachable loyalty. The one quality no amount of money can guarantee, but which I must have in those closest to me." I finally sank into the chair, trying to process this revelation. "You deceived me. You deceive everyone." "Yes." He sipped his drink, watching me over the rim of his glass. "The candidates who pass the initial interviews are subjected to this charade. They care for me, follow my unreasonable demands, and inevitably discover the truth, usually by accident as you did. Their reaction determines their future." "The other caregivers," I said slowly. "They discovered this too." Grant nodded. 5 of them attempted to blackmail me, threatening to expose my secret unless I paid them substantially more than their already generous salary. They were dismissed with severance packages and non-disclosure agreements. The 6th simply quit, citing moral objections to the deception, admirably ethical, but ultimately useless to me. "And what do you expect from me?" I asked, the full weight of my vulnerable position becoming clear. "Without this job, I would be homeless within weeks." "I expect you to make a choice by morning," Grant replied, setting down his glass. "Option 1. You agree to maintain my secret, continue as my caregiver in name, while actually serving as a personal assistant, and receive double the already substantial compensation I offered. Option 2. You leave with 1 month's salary and never speak of what you saw here." The offer hung between us in the quiet room. Double the salary would solve all my financial problems within months. I could afford my own apartment, repay Amanda for her reluctant hospitality, perhaps even begin to rebuild some semblance of the security I had lost. All for the price of my complicity in a billionaire's elaborate deception. Why? I asked finally. Why this elaborate charade? Something dark flickered across Grant's features. Because wealth attracts parasites, Mr. Williams. People who present false faces, make promises they never intend to keep, profess loyalty they do not possess. 5 years ago, my closest friend and business partner stole proprietary technology worth billions and vanished. Before that, I had 3 serious relationships, all with women who claimed to love me but were actually collecting information for competitors or positioning themselves for lucrative divorces. He stood and walked to the window, his movements betraying none of the paralysis he had feigned. The wheelchair creates a barrier, a filter. It reveals true character. Those who see weakness and seek to exploit it expose themselves. Those who demonstrate genuine care might be worthy of trust. And those who discover your deception and keep your secret prove their loyalty, I concluded. Precisely. He turned back to face me. Consider your options carefully, Mr. Williams. I require your decision by 7 a.m. It was a dismissal. I rose, leaving the untouched drink on the side table, and walked back to my room in a daze. Sleep was impossible now, my mind racing through implications and options. The practical choice was obvious. Accept Grant's offer, play along with his deception, and secure my financial future. No one would be physically harmed by the charade. Grant was clearly troubled, perhaps even paranoid, but he was not dangerous, merely distrustful. Yet as I sat on the edge of my bed, Eleanor's photo caught the moonlight from my window. Her smile, warm and genuine, reminded me of the values we had shared, the integrity we had tried to instill in Amanda, the lessons about honesty I had taught generations of students. Could I participate in a lie, however lucrative, and still face myself in the mirror each morning? Could I compromise the principles of a lifetime for security in my final years? As dawn approached, I was no closer to an answer that would satisfy both my conscience and my desperate circumstances. I did not sleep that night. As morning light gradually illuminated my room, I sat in the armchair facing the window, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. The same lake I had viewed from a different angle throughout my life, now framed by the palatial windows of a billionaire's mansion where I faced the most difficult decision of my recent years. Eleanor's voice seemed to whisper from her photograph on the nightstand. "What would you tell your students to do?" she would have asked. The answer was clear, but the consequences terrifying. At precisely 7 a.m., I showered, dressed in the provided uniform, and made my way to Grant's study. The mansion felt different now, the opulence tainted by the knowledge it housed an elaborate deception. I knocked on the heavy oak doors at exactly 7:15, medication tray in hand as required by the schedule. "Enter," called Grant's voice, now recognizable in its subtle differences between his public and private personas. He sat in his wheelchair behind the desk, the picture of disability he presented to the world. His expression remained neutral as I placed the medication tray before him. "Have you reached a decision, Williams?" he asked, not touching the pills. I stood straight, hands clasped behind my back, and looked him directly in the eyes. "I have, Mr. Grant, and I cannot participate in your deception." His expression did not change, but his fingers tensed slightly on the arms of his wheelchair. "That is disappointing. Option 2 it is, then. Patricia will arrange your severance and transportation back to Chicago." "I have not finished," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I propose a third option." This caught his attention. He leaned forward slightly. "I am listening. I will stay, but not under false pretenses. You need someone you can trust, someone who will speak truth to you, not another person willing to lie for money." A flash of anger crossed his features. "You presume to judge me?" "No, sir. I merely offer an alternative perspective." I gestured to the wheelchair. "This deception might reveal disloyalty in others, but it is also preventing you from living a full life. You have imprisoned yourself in this mansion, in that chair, all to test people who ultimately fail your impossible standard. Grant's face hardened. You understand nothing about my situation. I understand loss, I replied quietly. I understand betrayal. My wife of 42 years died in my arms. The career I built over decades evaporated. My only daughter gave me 30 days to find work or face homelessness. I lost everything I valued except my integrity, which you now ask me to compromise. Something in my words penetrated his defensive posture. He wheeled himself around the desk until we were face to face. Loyalty is not an impossible standard, he said, his voice low and intense. It is the only standard that matters. Forced loyalty is no loyalty at all, I countered. What you create through these tests is fear and complicity, not genuine trust. Grant abruptly stood from the wheelchair, abandoning his charade. He paced the study, energy radiating from his movements. Do you know what betrayal at my level costs? 5 years ago, my closest friend, a man I considered a brother, stole an artificial intelligence algorithm we developed together. He sold it to our competitors and disappeared. That technology was worth billions. But more importantly, it was the culmination of my life's work. So you decided to trust no one, I said, following his logic. I decided to verify before trusting, he corrected sharply. To test before believing, to protect myself from ever experiencing that level of betrayal again. I thought of my classroom, the thousands of students I had taught over 35 years, the troublemakers and the quiet ones, the brilliant minds and those who struggled. How many times had I seen defensive barriers erected after betrayals, small or large? Mr. Grant, I said carefully, in my experience teaching high school for 35 years, I learned something important about trust. When we test people, we often create the very behavior we fear. Students suspected of cheating become resentful and sometimes begin cheating in response. Those trusted with responsibility usually rise to meet expectations. He stopped pacing, studying me with those intense blue eyes. A high school classroom is not the real world, Williams. Perhaps not, I conceded, but human nature remains consistent. Your current approach has failed 6 times already. Maybe the problem isn't finding the right person to deceive, but the deception itself. Grant resumed pacing, hands clasped behind his back. What exactly are you proposing? Honesty, I replied simply. Hire me as your actual assistant, not a caregiver for a condition you don't have. I will maintain your privacy about past deceptions, but I won't participate in continuing them. In return, I offer loyalty based on mutual respect, not fear or financial desperation. A long silence followed as Grant processed my proposal. I stood my ground, though internally I trembled at the prospect of rejection. Without this position, I had nowhere to go. Finally, Grant returned to his desk, ignoring the wheelchair. Your perspective island, unexpected. No one has challenged my methodology so directly before. Perhaps that's why it hasn't worked, I suggested. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps. He studied me for another long moment. You realize you're gambling with your future? I could dismiss you right now, and you've admitted you have nowhere to go. I'm aware, I said. But some principles are worth the risk. Grant nodded slowly. Pack your things, Williams. My heart sank. I had overplayed my hand, allowed pride to overcome practicality. Eleanor would have understood, but that was cold comfort in the face of impending homelessness. I'll be ready to leave within the hour, I said, turning toward the door. That won't be necessary, Grant called after me. Pack your things from the east wing. You'll be moving to the guest suite in the main house. If you're to be my assistant rather than my caregiver, your accommodations should reflect the change in status. I turned back, uncertain I'd heard correctly. You're accepting my proposal? Conditionally, he replied, his expression unreadable. A trial period, 1 month. We'll reassess then. He picked up his tablet, already shifting attention to his work. The wheelchair charade ends today, at least within these walls. Patricia will need to be informed. Thank you, Mr. Grant, I said, relief washing over me. He looked up, his gaze sharp. Don't thank me yet, Williams. I'm still not convinced your approach is correct. But after 6 failures, I'm willing to experiment with an alternative methodology. I nodded, understanding this was as close to acceptance as I would get for now. As I reached the door, Grant spoke again. Williams, one question. What would you have done if I had rejected your proposal? I considered this carefully before answering. I would have left with my integrity intact and faced whatever came next, just as I did when I lost everything else. For the first time, I saw genuine respect in Maxwell Grant's eyes. 7:30 breakfast in the dining room, he said. We have much to discuss about your new role. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The path ahead remained uncertain, but I would walk it as myself, not as a participant in deception. Eleanor would have been proud, and in this moment, that mattered more than security. The transformation began slowly, like ice melting at the first hint of spring. In those initial weeks, Grant maintained his distance, testing my resolve in different ways. He would appear in his wheelchair when visitors came to the estate, then stand and pace as soon as they left, watching my reaction each time. I neither commented on the deception nor participated in it, simply going about my duties as his assistant rather than caregiver. Patricia had been stunned when Grant informed her of my new position and knowledge of his secret. In 5 years, no one has ever. She had begun, then collected herself. Very well, Mr. Grant. I'll update the employment records. The look she gave me afterward mixed caution with a grudging respect. My responsibilities shifted from the menial tasks of caregiving to substantive work managing Grant's correspondence, scheduling meetings, and even providing input on philanthropic initiatives. My background in education proved surprisingly valuable, as Grant considered funding STEM programs in underserved schools. These proposals all focus on technology, I noted during our 3rd week working together. But many of these students need basic educational support before advanced computing. Grant had frowned, then nodded slowly. You speak from experience. Revise the proposal accordingly. It was the first time he had explicitly valued my perspective, a small but significant breakthrough. By the 2nd month, our working relationship had settled into a productive rhythm. Grant gradually abandoned his wheelchair entirely within the mansion, and I noticed him venturing onto the grounds occasionally, though always in areas shielded from public view. You know, I said one evening as we reviewed documentation for a new tech venture, being seen in public without the wheelchair would not destroy your reputation. People recover from injuries. Medical advances happen. He had looked up sharply. The deception has gone on too long. Questions would be asked. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But living authentically might be worth some temporary scrutiny. He changed the subject, but I noticed him gazing thoughtfully toward the lake afterward, the documents forgotten before him. Our conversations gradually extended beyond business. Grant was brilliant but isolated, his vast knowledge of technology and markets contrasting with a limited understanding of ordinary human connection. One evening over dinner, he asked about my teaching career, actually listening as I described the challenges and rewards of educating young minds. Why history? He inquired. Why not science or mathematics? History teaches us about human nature, I replied. About patterns that repeat, mistakes we keep making, and occasionally, the capacity for positive change. Something in this resonated with him. The next morning, I found him reading a biography of Theodore Roosevelt that had sat untouched on his library shelves. 3 months into our arrangement, Grant surprised me by asking about Eleanor. We were working late, reviewing contracts for a new AI security protocol. Your wife, he said abruptly. You mentioned she died of cancer. Tell me about her. The request caught me off guard. What would you like to know? What made her different from others? Why did you trust her completely when I find it so difficult to trust anyone? I set down my tablet, memories of Eleanor flooding back with bittersweet clarity. She was honest, even when truth was difficult. She never pretended to be perfect but always tried to be better. And she believed people deserved second chances. Grant considered this. My experience suggests such people are rare exceptions. Perhaps, I conceded. Or perhaps we find what we're looking for. Eleanor looked for good in people, so she often found it. You look for deception, so that's what you tend to find. The conversation marked a turning point. Grant began asking more personal questions, not as tests, but from genuine curiosity. He shared carefully edited stories from his own past, the brilliant but lonely child prodigy who had never quite learned how to connect with others. 6 months after my midnight discovery, Grant made an unexpected proposal. We were reviewing his substantial portfolio of tech investments when he suddenly changed the subject. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "Your age makes traditional employment difficult, despite your capabilities." I nodded. The reality still painful, despite my current stability. "I want to establish a foundation," he continued, "focused on creating meaningful employment opportunities for older adults with valuable experience. You would direct it." The offer took my breath away. "That's extremely generous, but I have no experience running a foundation." "You have decades of experience managing resources and mentoring others," he countered. "The technical aspects can be learned. More importantly, you understand the problem personally." 2 weeks later, the Elder Wisdom Foundation was incorporated with a $10 million initial endowment. My salary, as executive director, would ensure I never had to worry about housing or financial security again. Grant provided office space in his downtown building and connected me with legal and financial advisors to navigate the nonprofit sector. The foundation quickly became my passion. We developed programs placing retired teachers as mentors in struggling schools, created a job placement service specializing in experienced workers, and funded research into age discrimination. Grant reviewed our progress weekly, his analytical mind, helping refine our approach while respecting my leadership. With financial stability came the ability to repair fractured relationships. I moved into a comfortable apartment in the city, close enough to maintain my work with Grant, but establishing my independence. I invited Amanda and her family for dinner, the first time I had hosted them, rather than being their reluctant guest. The awkwardness gradually dissolved as they saw my transformation from desperate dependent to purposeful professional. Amanda's initial skepticism about the foundation gave way to genuine interest. "I had no idea so many companies actively avoid hiring older workers," she admitted during one visit. "We have several near retirement at my firm who still have so much to offer." "Perhaps your company would consider partnering with the foundation," I suggested. The corporate program we developed together became one of our most successful initiatives. The most profound change, however, was in Grant himself. Our professional relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship, the billionaire and the teacher finding unexpected common ground. He began accompanying me to foundation events, initially reluctant but increasingly engaged. At one gala celebrating our first anniversary, Grant shocked the attendees by publicly abandoning his wheelchair ruse. The story he offered was carefully constructed, a miraculous recovery through experimental treatment, but it was a step toward authenticity that I had never expected him to take. "Why now?" I asked afterward as we returned to the mansion. "Living a lie becomes exhausting," he replied simply. "You taught me that." The foundation's success led to national recognition. As I approached my 70th birthday, I found myself speaking at conferences, consulting with corporations on age-inclusive hiring practices, and mentoring other older adults transitioning to new careers. The work energized me in ways I hadn't felt since my teaching days. Grant, too, was transformed. The reclusive, paranoid billionaire gradually reopened his life to meaningful connections. He recruited brilliant minds for his ventures based on character rather than deceptive tests. Some proved unworthy of his trust, but many exceeded expectations when given the opportunity. One evening, nearly 2 years after our confrontation in his study, Grant and I sat on the terrace overlooking the lake. The sunset painted the water gold and crimson, reminiscent of the views Eleanor and I had cherished from our modest porch in Lakeside. "I would never have predicted this outcome," Grant said, breaking a comfortable silence. "When you discovered my deception, I expected either exploitation or departure. The most valuable paths are often neither the obvious ones nor the easy ones," I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "My entire approach was fundamentally flawed. Testing people with deception only proves their reaction to deception, not their inherent trustworthiness." "We all make mistakes when protecting ourselves from pain," I said. "The question is whether we learn from them." "I had surrounded myself with people who reinforced my worst instincts," Grant continued. "You were the first to challenge them constructively." The foundation continued to grow, expanding nationally with satellite offices in major cities. Grant's connections opened doors, but it was the mission itself that resonated with donors and partners. By my 72nd birthday, we had helped place over 5,000 older adults in meaningful employment and changed hiring policies at dozens of major corporations. Amanda and I rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing. Her twins, now in college, occasionally sought my advice about careers and life decisions, valuing the perspective that comes with age rather than dismissing it as irrelevant. Grant, meanwhile, emerged from his self-imposed isolation to become a thoughtful voice in the tech community, advocating for ethical approaches to artificial intelligence and meaningful human oversight of automated systems. The experience of betrayal that had nearly destroyed him became a source of wisdom rather than bitterness. I often reflect on the strange journey that led me here. The devastating loss of Eleanor that seemed to end my purposeful life. The humiliation of dependency that drove me to desperation. The midnight discovery that forced a moral choice between security and integrity. Each painful step led to this unexpected renewal. Life rarely offers straight paths to wisdom. Sometimes we must lose everything to discover what truly matters. Sometimes rejection and betrayal open doors to deeper connection. Sometimes standing firm on principle, even when terrified of the consequences, is the only way to find lasting peace. Had I chosen differently that morning in Grant's study, accepting comfort through complicity, I might have secured financial stability, but lost something far more precious. By honoring Eleanor's memory through my actions, I found not just security but purpose, not just employment but meaning. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple. In the gathering darkness, I could almost feel Eleanor's presence beside me, her gentle wisdom guiding me still. The path ahead remained uncertain, as all futures must, but I faced it now with confidence born of experience and the knowledge that true wealth comes not from what we possess, but from what we give. Have you ever faced a moment where standing on principle seemed impossible given your circumstances? What did you choose? And how did that choice shape your future? I believe these defining moments reveal our true character more than any success or failure. If my story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button, and subscribe to hear more life experiences that might offer wisdom for your own journey. Thank you for walking this path with me today. And remember that sometimes our greatest setbacks lead to our most meaningful opportunities.